Hello, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us, the podcast where personal stories inspire global change. I'm your host, Stephen Schauer, and today we're diving into a remarkable tale of resilience, regeneration, and the power of community. My guest, Jenny Barlow, grew up in an industrial town where her love for nature flourished within the challenges of urban life. That passion set her on a path to become a visionary leader in landscape architecture and grassroots environmental action. In this episode, Jenny shares how integrating people and nature is at the very heart of sustainable land management. From restoring natural processes that mitigate flood risks to spearheading one of Scotland's transformative community land buyouts, Jenny highlights the profound impact of collective action. Jenny's story illustrates how government support, land reform, and hope can create a ripple effect of regeneration, both ecological and economic. We'll also explore the challenges and triumphs of working at a grassroots level, where trust building, community engagement, and the willingness to embrace change are essential ingredients for progress. This is a story of how small beginnings can lead to extraordinary transformations, guided by 4 pillars of sustainability. Let me give you some more background about Jenny before we jump into this inspiring episode of Stories Sustain Us. Jenny Barlow is the estate manager at Tarras Valley Nature Reserve, where she is part of the team at the Langham initiative, who is taking forward the development of Tarras Valley Nature Reserve following the historic Langholm Moor community buyout. Jenny helped to oversee the second stage of the community buyout to bring the final 5,300 acres of land into community ownership, and now she looks after land-based activities and operations on the reserve. This includes everything from restoring damaged peatlands, preserving ancient woodlands, ecological restoration initiatives, and day-to-day maintenance. Jenny has a background in delivering environmental projects, land management, community development, and sustainability. She has previously worked on landscape-scale nature restoration projects to reduce the impacts of climate change and flooding. She has diverse experience in sustainability roles across public and third sector, including community-led design and master planning, engineering with nature projects, low-carbon construction, and infrastructure schemes. Now, join me as we journey into Jenny's inspiring world of hope, action, and profound connection to both the land and the people who call it home. Let's get started here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Jenny, welcome to Stories Sustain Us. How are you today?
I'm
Afternoon,
great.
good afternoon for you, good morning for me.
It's lovely to be here. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to coming on. So yeah, I'm joining in from a very cold Scotland.
Yeah, I'm from a very cold Seattle this morning, so we are both trying to stay warm.
Yep.
Well, I've been very excited about this conversation too, ever since I came across your name and the work that you're doing there in Scotland, and I cannot wait to jump in to learning more about it. But first, I want to jump into learning more about you. So, what's your story, Jenny? Tell us kind of where are you from, and what are some of the highlights of your childhood and your education and career that led you to doing this amazing work that you're now doing. So let's.
I'm from a town in now a city northeast of England called Sunderland. So that's where I've been sort of raised. I grew up. So it's like a industrial town. It was really famous for its coal mines and shipbuilding industry, so quite industrial.
Yeah.
So it's funny where I am now, because I do see a lot of like parallels with that kind of history where I am now in Langham. There's a lot of parallels with that kind of industrial past, and also the type of people that live and live in those sorts of places. I would definitely say that growing up there, it really did shape me, and I think it's really sort of it attracted me to come and do what I'm doing now, really.
Yeah.
It was an amazing place to grow up. So I was there till I was 18. Always really passionate about the natural environment and always been drawn to that kind, to animals and nature. So but I never really knew when I moved away from Sunderland at 18, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I was just kind of, I think everyone at that age, you feel a bit forced to make big, long life choices.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
there was a lot of pressure, I think, to go and decide and go to university and stuff like that. So yeah, I went and studied landscape architecture. And then after that, started to get much more passionate about communities and community voice, and how do the people that live in places have a say over what happens in the environment, and how is it fair, how are we fair really, and how we try and involve people and have like active community participation and engagement in land and nature and the environment. So I think that's what I started to become a lot more passionate in when I'd worked in sort of various local like public sector and charity.
Okay.
My passion for bringing land, people, nature together started when I'd got into work really after university, and then I was working in Yorkshire just before I came to this job. So I was living in Leeds, which is like sort of middle of England kind of thing, or northern, depending on where you are in the country. I say it's middle of England, but I don't think people that live there would agree. Depends how far north you're from. And I was working at the Environment Agency, so I think that's probably like the equivalent of like EPA,
okay,
in the US, and was working a lot with communities that were affected by climate change and flood risk.
Okay.
And doing a lot of engagement with landowners and communities who'd been flooded about how you could restore river catchments to help to reduce the effects of climate change. So that was something that was I really started to feel really passionate about, like getting communities really having a voice and having a say over what happened. And I saw loads of amazing projects that just came out of adversity, where people had been affected by awful flooding and like horrible things, where they'd had everything destroyed, and then they just came together and were like, right, we're doing something. And I found that kind of like grassroots action was the thing that I just thought, you can't like even like create that. It comes from those sorts of places, out of people like innovating out of like adversity. And so during that time, when I was working there, I started to read about this buyout in Scotland, where a community during the pandemic had started trying to raise funds to buy 10,500 acres of land from the Duke of Buccleuch, who's I think at the time, or maybe around that time, he was the sort of first or second biggest landowner in Scotland, or has been the largest landowner in Scotland for a very long time anyway. And I just thought, I'm gonna have to apply for that job. It's like everything I'm passionate about, everything. So that's how that led me here, really.
Yeah. Well, there's so much I want to dig into.
Yeah, go for it.
and I definitely want to dig into your time working on flooding. That's near and dear to my heart. Most of my professional career has been working in river systems, and I have a deep passion for that as well. So, but before I kind of dive into that work, I want to go back in time even further to your childhood growing up in Sunderland. Being an industrial city, as you described, how did you get connected to nature? Was it on holidays, or was through school, or how did that happen to you as you were growing up?
I think it wasn't kind of like going out into the countryside as much as like just get the sea was my main contact.
Okay,
that
right
was
there
the
on the
main.
coast.
So it's like along the seaside, so coastal, and just going in along the sea into the rock pool. So it's quite different to the sort of landscape I'm working in now. But I think that was my thing of just like just being on the beach. And a lot of the time the beach was covered in coal, and like there was loads of like coal, the like industrial, but there was so much wildlife you could find in all the rock pools, and like that kind of going down to see the sea when it's crashing off the rocks and big storms and things. That's what I used to love being by the sea. It still calms us now when I'm like quite stressed or whatever. I'm like, right, I need time by the sea.
Nice. Okay. Well, I was wondering how that connection. Nice.
Yeah, that was my main, like, I suppose, access to like nature then. and just like the local parks and things. So it wasn't really like the hills I'm living in now, by any means. And then after that, it's quite like urban access to nature, but it's still amazing what you can kind of find and where you can go and find solace when you're in a quiet park or a woodland.
Absolutely.
Even in the most urban of areas, you can find it.
Yeah.
So it is quite different to living in kind of rural Scotland now. It really is. But yeah, I think it's just that connection with something wild was the sea for me.
So, and this is my next question. I just have to ask because this is more. I'm a big Premier League follower, so and I'm familiar with the Netflix Sunderland till you die. So I got to ask: Are you given that Sunderland's not in the Premier League any longer? Do you follow it, and B, what's I believe if I got the map right, Newcastle's pretty close to Sunderland, and Newcastle's in the Premier League. So is there like a big rivalry between Newcastle and Sunderland?
I think there's a lot of rivalry between the two, like over football and stuff. And I think like growing up and stuff, it would be like you'd like be insulted if like somebody thought you're from Newcastle or someone from Newcastle thinks you're from Sunderland, but people think that from elsewhere. But yeah, I think I've never really been big on the football, but I think the thing that I love about it is the pride that people have.
Absolutely.
And the absolute like passion. That's like your roots. That's where you're from, and you support your city, and like the amount of pride. And like on a match day in Sunderland, like I think maybe the football I'm not so into, but what it generates is the thing that I just love. Like seeing everybody pouring over the bridge, going into the stadium, and like how it brings people together and stuff. And like on a match day, the town's just like alive, and you can hear all the shouting and the crowd, like from the roar from the stands in the stadium. And that's what I think the bit that like I love is just the fact that it brings people together in such a way. You don't see many things that bring people together like that, from like all walks of life, which that's what I love about it.
Well, I've played growing up here in the States, and I've always been a big fan. And whenever I'm talking to someone from the UK, I have to ask. So whether they're a football fan or not, I just have to ask.
It's so huge here. Yeah. And I think it does have like its roots in industrial, like it does have the roots in those places. So I think that's why, when you go to towns or cities like Sunderland, it's like, or, areas like that, it's got really strong roots, in industrial past, and it really does. So I think it's definitely it makes me proud to just see like how it brings people together.
Well, I appreciate that perspective on it, because I'm thinking about the match, and I really, but I talk to friends here in the States who aren't familiar with it, and being familiar with American football, and then what I think is real football, what you guys do over there. The crowds are just different. I mean, people are rabid fans here and very supportive here, but part of the joy that I have in just watching a match is hearing the chants and the singing and just the jeering of the other players and other fans, and just the atmosphere of the stadium, like you described, that comes through on the television even, and
it does.
So
and you see all the faces of all the fans, and everybody's just. There's a really famous picture at a Sunderland match where it was taken from like the like everybody in the stands, and everybody's watching a ball go, and it's one of my favorite pictures, because you could just see the whole crowd just like staring and watching,
so enthralled,
watching this moment, and they're all just like in the moment watching it, and it's one of my favorite pictures. It's so good.
Well, thank you for my little sidebar into my second passion in life is football. So first passion is sustainability and environment, but but let's get back onto more important things. Your life is way more important. So where did you end up going to university then after you left Sunderland? Sheffield. Okay.
Yeah, so Yorkshire. And that was it was a really lovely place to go to uni, because it was a city, but it's surrounded by hills. So you feel, even though you're in a really big city, you do feel like you're in a much smaller place. But it was an amazing place to go and study. I really enjoyed. I was there for 4 years, and then moved to Birmingham after that, and Coventry. So I went
Okay.
into quite an very, very urbanized area after that.
Yeah.
But still working in environment and communities and landscape.
And
So
what did you leave university with? What specifically were you studying?
so I was studying landscape architecture,
Like,
so did
that's right. You
undergrad and
mentioned it. Yeah.
masters in landscape
Yeah.
architecture. So, and I think the thing that I always like, even though I didn't sort of go away and practice like after uni, I did it for a little while in practice. But I think one of the things that it really helps you to do is that you don't look at the landscape or the environment or the land without people. And I think
Sure.
that happens an awful lot where people look at land or they'll look at the environment and they imagine it, they almost like treat it like there's no people there, or they
Yeah.
don't think about how people are going to feel about it, how they might use it, like how are people going to interact with all these plans that you have, or
Yeah.
like how do people have a say. So I think that was something that I came away that probably started that kind of thought of like you have to think of like all the different interactions and like how I suppose, yeah, so that sort of people-focused approach, I think, has stood us in good stead since then.
Yeah. I was actually having a conversation with some colleagues in my paying job yesterday about that very issue. We were driving along a levee system and having a discussion about the restoration of some ag land adjacent to the river, and how some people just want the land to be left alone to kind of rewild itself, and the discussion around, well, it's not going to end up like you want it. If you don't have some management of it and envision people interacting with that land, it'll end up, with blackberry bushes so thick that you can't use it for anything recreational or enjoyable, and so that very idea that you're talking about of people are part of the land are part of people, to make sure that we're seeing that interconnection as we
and I think we've become like, certainly like in the last sort of 5, maybe 10 years, I do feel like we've just become more and more disconnected as like humanity with land and nature, and we think we're like separate from it. And I think that approach of looking at the land in like aspic and almost looking at it as if we're divorced from it almost is something we really keep doing it. And I'm like, you're never going to come up with a sustainable solution if you're always like thinking of like, people are over here, nature's over here, like we'll do these things and we'll keep them all separate. So that, I think that's what that's my where I'm really passionate about, is that you bring that having communities and people, in whatever form a community takes, that's sort of really embedded in how you look at the land.
Yeah, I think it has to be that because whether we believe we're interconnected to the land or not, we are.
We are.
So
like it's funny, like we have this, like we literally depend on it for our water, air, like everything. Actual existence, like our life, and we look at it really separately, as if like, we definitely, I think I do feel like there's a lot of like movement towards changing that and shifting the focus. I do feel like we're getting there. Yeah. But maybe not quick enough.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But hopefully, folks like you and the work you're doing, and hopefully some of the things I'm doing and others like us that can help move
Chipping
that needle. Away. Right. So
definitely.
So you touch on I think a really important point, this idea of community engagement as you're working on these projects, and you mentioned that you really got a passion and taste for that in your position working on flooding issues, and talk a little bit about that. What were some of the projects that you worked on, and what were some of the lessons you learned about engaging community? And I imagine, similar to here, the story I'm telling myself in my mind, the folks that are flooding in your experience are also likely those who are maybe lower down the socioeconomic ladder, because the way we built, those who have more are usually in the better places, a higher ground, the safer ground, and we put the those who maybe have less in places of greater harm. Typically, at least that's how the United States has developed, and I'm assuming it's not too different in other, westernized, urbanized areas.
Yeah,
So
I
tell me
think
about working with people
it
and
definitely impacts like people of like, it definitely impacts people where like I worked in Doncaster for a little while, so like so that's South Yorkshire again.
hmm
Very, very strong like mining history there,
hmm
and a lot of the houses that flooded regularly and like communities were most affected by floods were in sort of like mining areas, and their houses have been put up for people that were working in the mines and like the coal at the time. And then
yeah,
obviously now we've got climate change, we're much higher risk of flooding, and those communities are sat right in the path of all of that risk. So but I think it's just the way that I think especially England, it's very sort of densely populated in a lot of cities now. There's probably been in the past inappropriate development on floodplains.
yeah,
But actually, what I found when I was working at the Environment Agency, like in Yorkshire, was that it actually affected people from across the whole
everywhere. Yeah,
spectrum of like whether you were really wealthy or you were really, or you were really struggling to pay your bills. And I think that was the thing that but I think how in the aftermath, how they recover is different because they might not have been able to pay for
sure.
insurance.
That
And
resiliency,
that's where the economic impact really hits, because
yeah,
it's horrendous to the insurance to be paid and everything and try and recover from a massive flood. It's much, much harder, and you're much more at a disadvantage if you can't pay for all the insurance and all the
you
expensive
don't
things
have the
to
resources to begin
retrofit
with.
your home and do all of those things. So I think I learned so much in that job, just like seeing how it affected people and how, there were certain things where you could make so many big differences with like flood defense schemes. And I think one of the things that I loved working on the most was like, I helped on a big scheme where the Leeds was really badly affected by flooding, but what the project was doing was actually looking right the way upstream, and how do you start to restore the catchment, and how do you help restore
Sure.
natural processes so
Good.
that you don't have to keep engineering walls really high, that you don't have to keep like
Right.
having huge walls through cities. I mean, I think you still do need them, but they don't have to be as high. And then you have all those other amazing benefits to restore nature at the same time. So planting trees, restoring peat, wetlands, and
Yeah.
that's the stuff I really love. I do enjoy the engineering side. And I learnt loads from all the engineers and all the project managers I worked with in that job. But I definitely enjoyed the like the nature restoration side and the ecological restoration side the most. I think that's where like my passion really lay.
Yeah.
And working with landowners and really passionate people who wanted to make a difference in like planting trees. There's a group I worked with for a short time in like the Calder Valley, and they experience some awful flooding really regularly, but the community, like the resilience and the innovation in that valley and like that in Calderdale is just incredible. And like they've planted thousands and thousands of trees in the catchment. They've started to do loads, and yeah, I heard the other week that they're starting to look at community buyouts. So it's just, yeah, it's really amazing what can come from adversity.
Yeah.
As well as all the trauma and all of the really horrible emotions. There is actually some incredible projects and incredible sort of grassroots initiatives that can come out of those things. So yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I think that's probably what drew me back to working at a more grassroots level where I am now in Langham, just because I think that's where my passion really is, that like at a grassroots community level, that's where I feel like I can make the most impact.
Yeah. Did you find in that work that working with the community and educating people or bringing awareness to the idea of nature-based solutions, kind of restoring the land and the upper part of the catchment and the multi-benefits that can have, and including the flood mitigation, were people receptive to that message, or was it something that took a fair amount of community engagement to help people see flood control or flood management in a new way. And I ask because my experience in that, it took a considerable amount of kind of re-educating people, helping them unlearn what they thought a flood project should look like, and educate them about what it really could be when you brought nature back into it. And once it clicked, once they understood, like, oh, we can have nature and flood protection and flood mitigation at the same time, people got it. But it took some effort to educate people or re-educate people about the value of nature. Did you have a similar experience?
I think it varied. So I think you can provide a lot more. Well, it's an illusion of security in some ways when you look at climate risk. But when somebody sees, and that is an engineer as well, or like anybody, project manager, like within the Environment Agency or like out of it in communities, there's a lot more like maybe illusion of this, like you can provide with a wall. You can say, well, this wall will be designed to this certain height. You can have this level of standard protection. Your insurance will be this. You can almost put the numbers on that, and you can say, right, like that's what we're going to do, and this is what it'll provide. But if you start saying, oh, we're going to restore the catchment, we're not quite sure like how long the benefits are going to be, but it'll be amazing and we'll slow the flow, but we're not exactly sure by how much. I think that was one of the things that, like, me and other colleagues that were working there, it was the quantifying, and people want a number sometimes, and sometimes you can't really provide like that, but it's good. And it's like, it was kind of getting over like, how much do we need to quantify this, or do we just get on with it? But I think there was a lot of schemes that happened after, where like leaky dams had been put in and risk catchments had been restored, and then there were huge floods, and then the benefit of those schemes had been showed by like properties not flooding. And I think that was the evidence that actually, like, let's just get on with this. So then when I was working there, I think we'd gone past the point of needing public support. I think that it was almost like the feeling was, why are you not just getting on with this?
They already got there.
Well, just get on.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful.
So every public meeting I went to, it was like, what are you like, where can we do this with? So there was a lot more, just let's get on.
That's great. Yeah.
So that's how I experienced it at the time. But I don't think that, I think when people have been flooded, having the assurance of the more sort of like solid, like concrete schemes,
literally, yeah.
And they can be designed really, really well. Like there's some America's got some incredible examples of like nature-based designs and like engineering with nature, and I think you can do them in such different innovative ways where you can still have nature and like blended with some amazing engineering.
I think we're showing it can be done.
Examples, but I think we just need to be maybe a bit more imaginative sometimes.
Well, I found in my past community relations work, people who grew up in an urban environment and didn't really know what a natural river would look like or should look like, and everything you just said, like they understood what a drainage ditch looked like or what a concrete wall looked like, and they wanted that. And when we're explaining to them, well, we're going to give you all these trees and native grasses and wetlands and everything, we actually had some people saying no, they're actively fighting that because they didn't think it was going to provide the protection like you said, or frankly they were worried about having wildlife near their home and something that
it's just change and like the unknown.
Exactly.
And I think we've like across, I think in like the UK we do have like really, really depleted baselines for nature and like natural systems, and probably a lot of the landscape that we live in here it's been modified so much by like probably millennia, centuries of like modifications. Certainly in the last like say 400, accelerated over the last 100, 200 years. We've lost a lot of our like natural systems. So when you're trying to say, oh well, we're trying to restore nature, but we don't quite know what it's going to look like because we actually don't have any baselines. And then we have to look at Norway or other countries on the same latitudes to say, well, we think it'll probably look like this, but we don't know.
Don't know for sure, right?
Because we've got the landscapes are really beautiful, but they are also like very depleted.
Yeah.
So I think people we do have that shift in baseline where you've really lost touch with what a wild or a natural system looks like, and how it behaves, and that you can't always have control over every single interaction. And
exactly.
but I do think there's an exciting movement across the whole of the UK to start to look at well, how can we restore all these natural processes? How can we start to bring woodlands back into these treeless landscapes? How can we restore all our peatlands? And the fact that all of that will have amazing benefits for flood risk and communities downstream. Right. But it does take a whole reimagining of what we've all got used to, and what we've become totally detached from. So
right.
It's change, and I think we're all terrified of change and not having control.
Change is hard, right? Well, that is a perfect transition, almost like we planned it, to the work that you're doing now, which is innovative and amazing, and is doing all of those things, restoring peatlands and forests and wetlands and healthy catchment systems, and reimagining sustainable farming and all kinds of amazing things. So let's talk about that. Tell everybody what it is that you're doing, where you're doing it, and what it is, and let's dive into that work, because that is exactly what we're here to learn from you about, is all this amazing stuff that you're leading there in Scotland.
So I work as the reserve manager for Tarras Valley Nature Reserve. So in Langham, and Langham's based in Langham's in Dumfries and Galloway, so we're in south of Scotland, I think we're about 10 miles over the English, over past
pretty
England,
close to the border.
Scotland, over the border. So I moved up here to come and work for Langham Initiative. So Langham Initiative is a community development trust based in Langham, so it's been running since 1994. And I moved up here for the job 3.5 years ago, and it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's been such a roller coaster since then. It feels like I've been here a lot longer, just because of how much has happened and what's what we've managed to achieve in the time. It's been a privilege, it really has. So I moved up here to after the first buyout. So the community, led by the Langham Initiative, took forward a really historic buyout. It's a land buyout. So it was the first time at this scale it had happened in the south of Scotland. So the Duke of Buccleuch put the land up for sale. 10,500 acres went up, and it's a big river valley that kind of wraps around Langham. So it's really the land means a lot to people who live here, an awful lot. And there's centuries of traditions and marking of the common boundaries, and a very, very sort of deep-rooted land rights and land and connection to the land with the people that live here. So it was something that resonated very deeply when I started reading about it to move up here. It's been really amazing to work on it. So there was in 2019 the land went up for sale, and then 2021 the Langham Initiative took forward a buyout. So it started to fundraise, and the buyouts were done in 2 phases. Over that time, we've raised £6 million to bring that land into community ownership, and create a big nature reserve, basically. So one of the aspirations behind the buyout, and one of the really big things that drove it, was Langham has had suffered from the decline of its traditional industry. So it was textiles here. There's been a lot of job losses and all of the things that come with those sort of industries that sort of powered the area for so long, and then they went, and there's that loss of jobs, skills, identity with all of those traditional sort of industries. So when the land came up for sale, there was a lot of people that thought they were worried about the future, who would buy it, what would the incoming landowner do. But there was also that window of opportunity where it was like, right, this is going to come around once in a lifetime, and we'll not get the opportunity to buy this or bring this into community ownership ever again. And that has proved to be being right. So a few people at the Langham Initiative board and volunteers got together in the beginning and started to look at a buyout. And here we are, sort of over 4 years, we've managed to bring that land into community ownership. So one of the big things behind it was that land would help to support, be a powerful tool for community regeneration, as well as being able to contribute to the climate and nature emergency and do our bit for restoring nature on the doorstep. So the primary driver was economic regeneration, benefits for people, but also like large ecosystem restoration. So it kind of brings all those things together.
Yeah, all those kind of triple bottom line kind of ideas. We've talked about that on the show before. What's been incredible about it, and I think the thing that's humbled me the most, is just the interest and support we've had for like something that is a very locally based, kind of locally led project and a locally led land buyout. Is the interest that's come from around the world, from around the UK, like within this region, but like so far across the world the story reached, and people were getting in touch like during the second buyout and the first buyout, just being like, we're so inspired by this, like we're trying to do similar things where we live, like we want to do and you really, it makes you sort of realize that kind of thing is a lot more sort of hopeful, and hope does sort of it's a lot more infectious than a feeling of apathy, and I think that's what sort of really caught. It was like such a catalyst, and we had people getting in touch all the way through, and the messages we get on our GoFundMe, like everything was just so incredible. So we didn't think when we first started, and I think there was a general feeling of like, let's just see how this goes. Are we going to be able to do this and raise this much money? We didn't have very long. So the first buyout, there was about a 6-month window to raise the money. And then the second buyout, we had about a 9-month window. So it wasn't long to raise $6 million. Yeah. So that's part of the story that grabbed me.
It's a small charity. So, it's only a small number of people, and everybody's, everyone at the time before the paid staff came in were volunteers. So it's incredible what can be achieved when people come together behind something. And then what that does is, that draws in more and more and more people. And then before long, it becomes this movement that's like, it does feel, when I look back at it now, it does feel something I feel so privileged to have been a part of.
Yeah.
And then the hard work starts when the land transfers and it's bought.
Now you got something to do.
So it's almost like when you're working on like the campaign and the fundraising and everything like that, but then it's kind of like, actually it's a really big change for the people that live here, and it's a big change for the Langham Initiative. It's a big change to have that land go from like one landowner who's had it for hundreds of years.
I'm sure.
To like a much more so it's like a community-led model. And that's a really different thing for the south of Scotland, the Highlands of Scotland and the islands. Community ownership's been something that's been sort of happening for a lot longer, but in the south of Scotland it's quite new, so it is forging new ground. And I think, as we were saying earlier, change is scary. People get, it's a scary thing to like be bridging so much, and like the change of land use and how the land looks and what we're trying to do with it. It looks different, so there's a lot of change. So one of the really big things that we've been doing since the land transferred and before, and the thing that I've been really passionate about, is that we've just been out engaging with people just like all the time, and just being really visible and speaking to everybody, and just trying to sort of like say, right, look, we can shape this. Like, it's, what do you want to see? What are your priorities? And I don't think I think what's been really nice is that we've actually had some amazing ideas that we hadn't thought of, like in the first bit. So
Yeah.
there's been loads on like local food production and like growing and like how we graze animals on the land and things like that. So there's been loads of things like that have come up. And maybe with, I don't know, with global politics and worries about food security, I think those things might be coming out more strongly. Sure. But what's amazing is that we have some like land there and a community asset there in perpetuity, and what we do with it will, you know, hopefully that will benefit all the future generations of the people that live here and come and visit.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be, I suppose the team are almost there to facilitate and help to facilitate all that community engagement as we go forward and get people sort of connecting through the land in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Well, there's so much about this project that grabbed my attention and made me want to reach out to you. That sense of hope that you talked about was certainly part of it as well. And you know, as I looked more into what's being accomplished, if I understand it, you know, the vast majority of land in Scotland, like 95% or more of the land in Scotland is kind of privately held. So even just that first step of getting the community engagement to raise such a significant amount of money in such a short period of time to have this, you know, 10,500 acres set aside in perpetuity for the community. I mean, that alone is such a monumental success story.
It's huge.
And then
and it went by in a whirlwind, but it is huge. It's like such a big change, and like only 3% of the land in Scotland is owned by communities.
That's what, I knew it was over
3%. So hopefully we've helped to like shift that little figure at, like, you know, it might be like however much it's shifted it, but at least, you know, we're helping to. I think what it does is, especially with a project, I mean, the pressure sometimes is huge to be like, we've got to keep making this a success, but we will, because I do believe it's grounded on the right things and it's grounded in the right place. But I think it's that thing that like it can show the impact that like communities can have if you're given the chance, fair policies, the means to be able to have democratic kind of ownership and management of assets like land assets, buildings, and I think some of the solutions that we can look at, probably we're less bound, you know, we can be a lot more responsive, and the things that we can shape can be a very, very like responsive to local need. And I think that's the thing that's the biggest opportunity. And then I don't know, once you start to come into this field and look at who owns land, who has a say, how do people have a say over the land that's around them, like who owns it, who's benefiting from it, you realize that there's an awful lot of power bound up in who owns land. And
very much so.
And I think certainly, you know, well, definitely in Scotland and absolutely in England, there's a lot of sort of historic inequality in that, and then that still manifests today in who owns the land and who has power. There's a lot. So, you know, a community having sort of, you know, the ownership and the say over that a 10,500 acre piece of land is no small thing. It comes with a lot of responsibility, but hopefully we're showing, you know, the benefits of what, you know, what can be achieved when communities own facility, you know, can own buildings, land, but for us, you know, it's land and buildings. It's incredible, and hopefully, I mean, we've benefited a lot with land reform legislation that's been put in Scotland to deal with these kind of historic injustices over land. So we've benefited an awful lot, and I think probably without access to some of the things that have been put forward as part of land reform in Scotland, it would have been a lot harder to achieve what we've done.
That's good to know.
So this thing we'd had access to, like the Scottish Land Fund, which is a fund that the government make available for communities to buy land. So we accessed 2 million as part of that funding.
That's great
and
seed
then we
money,
also got access to support for legal fees and stuff like that. So there's an awful lot of things that, you know, the government have put in place. So I mean, there's land reform legislation's being revisited now, but we've certainly benefited from it. So
that's a really thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that part of the story, and I think that's a very important piece in demonstrating, government and public policies can either hinder these kind of things,
Oh, definitely.
because they're outdated policies or policies that are designed to support those that are in power, those who made the policies.
Yeah.
Historically anyway. But government does have a role to play when they can start to right the wrongs of the past with updated policies. So I didn't know that part of the story, and I think that's a really, thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful part of that story, that government does have a part to play in righting the wrongs of the past.
And supporting buyouts and things. So communities can also register interest in land. So it means they get first refusal on the land as well.
Oh,
so like they can reserve it basically to let them raise funds.
Wow.
So there's a lot of sort of mechanisms that have been put in place that have helped buyouts to happen.
Yeah.
But there is sort of calls now to as with every good policy, then you go back, revisit, and say, well, we can make it better. So that's what's happening now.
Sure. Or those who might want to tear it back down to not make it better.
Yeah, and that.
The fights go on in public policy. Absolutely. Well, you touched on this, but I want to dig a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more from you, because I think it's an important part of the story as well, that the part of the goal setting, at least as far as I'm understanding from the looking into what it, there's kind of like these three pillars, or four pillars rather, the people, nature, climate, and sustainability, that those four pillars are kind of what is driving the work that you're doing right now. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that came into identifying those four pillars. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that people have to be part of this, right?
Yes.
People have to be an important part of this process, and then how do you integrate people in with nature and climate issues, and then how do you figure out creative, innovative ways to do all that in a sustainable way so future generations can benefit as well. And that seems to be like the very foundation of everything that you're doing there. So tell me a bit more about those. So I think did I describe it right, or
no, definitely. That's great. So we like at the start of the buyout, we said, right, well, we want to create a nature reserve. We want it to have all these community benefits, and we want, it's climate action. We want to do our bit, and it also has to, have sustainability embedded. So I think those kind of four pillars help to provide the parameters and a really clear vision, like all the way through. So from like day one, the scope's been fair enough. A lot of detail hadn't been added by that point, and we're still adding the detail and working it out now. We've got the land, but that helped to provide a really clear like parameter and vision as we went, and that sort of was the real push behind the buyout, that we could communicate what we wanted to do with the land, and that but then also once we've got the land, it's helped to keep us in focus, I think, and really keep us grounded in constantly coming back and saying, right, this is what we're here to do, this is what we're trying to do with the land. So it is a really good roadmap. And I think what was the biggest thing was that I think we were saying it earlier, I think when we look at like ecological restoration, community voice is something that is seen as a tick box exercise, and it's just seen as, oh, well, like they don't really know what they're talking about. Right. We'll pilot the experts in and we'll tell them what to do, or we'll tell people or we'll listen to them, and then we'll go away and do what we want. We know best.
You guys do that over there too? That happens over here all the time.
And I think that is what gets the apathy. People get disconnected.
It's such a wrong way of doing it.
You get the apathy, but then you also get like people just feeling really disempowered. And I think, we definitely don't have, like, we're definitely not going to get it right all the time. Like, we're definitely not. But I think that, like, one of the things that we've been really keen on doing from the start is, what are the benefits that people are going to get from this? Like, what are the economic benefits? How is this land going to benefit the town? How is this land going to benefit people? So I think that's what we're always coming back to. So, and I think that is essential, because if people, like, I mean, I think people that live here have a very strong ownership over like the common riding land, because they've marked that for 270 years.
Yeah.
And that is the sense of ownership and connection is so strong, like it's so strong. But I think what we're really wanting to do with the nature reserve is that like you encourage that feeling of stewardship and ownership over the whole thing, because if you don't have people bought in and supporting and wanting to get involved, it's not going to last as an asset in perpetuity for the community if people aren't bought in and really shaping it from the ground up. So yeah, when we started, when the land transferred over, we've been doing a lot of work on like our 5-year plan, and then also like what do people want to see from the land, and then our engagement looks so different from like, depending on what it is and depending on the thing, it'll look different. So I think we've been really flexible and responsive to like how we speak to people about certain things, or if they want to come to us. And certainly it isn't easy, and it definitely isn't like a utopia at all. Like there's, people don't agree, like,
Sure.
There'll always be people that don't agree with the buyout and don't think that it should be in community ownership. But I think one of the things that I've had to like, I suppose you always like, this, but you kind of come to the realization that like you can't win everybody, and like there'll always be people that don't agree. But that's actually okay. That's the nature of democracy.
Right.
Like,
they have a voice and
okay.
they have a right to use it, right?
And if somebody said everyone agrees, I'm not sure they would be telling the truth. Like if
100%.
On anything,
100%.
on anything,
yeah, absolutely.
and change and land and anything to do with land, it brings in politics, and there's all kinds of things it brings up. And like I think sometimes with sort of ecosystems and how we see the land, there's a lot of cultural things tied up in how we think the land should look. So there is a lot. I think we are bridging big changes in terms of who owns the land, how it's going to be managed, what does it look like.
Yeah.
Trees are growing in places like that they've never ever grown, or like there's water pooling in places because we're starting to look at new wetlands. We're starting to look at how do we block drainage ditches to recreate, like to restore peatland. So the land is looking, it will look different, but that's I suppose it's just change. But I think it's one of the things we have really tried is just always bringing it back to like supporting local contractors, helping to support local businesses, trying to keep like funneling those economic benefits back to the area, back to the town, so that they're felt locally. And I think that's probably like one of the things. And obviously, people being able to have the means to shape it in the ways that they want, in the ways that suit them. So that's what we've been trying to sort of facilitate in amongst all the finding out about the land, finding out about the species that live here, what ecosystems do we have, how do we restore it. It's amazing. It's quite overwhelming sometimes, but it's amazing at the same time.
Well, just like we talked earlier about how there's definitely a shift in our thinking around engineering and how we can work with nature-based solutions and restore things and really do these grand scale ecosystem restoration projects, as you just described. I think there's, in my personal experience and in speaking with you and others in this line of work around the world, there seems to be a shifting also in how we engage with the community, which I think is so important as well. It's slowly, but there does seem to be a shift away from that top down. We're the experts. We're just going to come tell you what it is, like it or not. This is what we're going to do because we know better than you. Into this model that now that you're describing, of where there's really true community engagement that can bring forth some inspired ideas that maybe the experts might have missed, right? Because we don't know, those of us who may be an expert in a particular field, we still don't know everything either. So that idea of in really engaging community in a meaningful way does, I think, create some ideas that can be then turned into reality, that then feeds a better loop. Whereas before the loop was, we tell you what it is, like it or not, and there's a loop of disengagement and disenfranchisement and apathy, as you described. But this new way of doing it, where somebody brings an idea forward that resonates and can be done, and it's done and implemented, and then they see that their feedback mattered and was heard and listened to, that then creates more ownership and a sense of
builds trust. I think it's like that thing of like,
absolutely,
and I think sometimes like there are things that like, I mean, we've been working very hard to do that, but I think we all recognize that building trust and having that go in two ways, it's going to take a long time. And I think that's the thing where people like want to fit community into a box and be like, oh, we'll follow this really neat pattern, and at the end everyone will agree and we can go away and just do it. And like, or at the end it'll go, oh, we've hatched all these plans behind closed doors, we better go and speak to people now. And you probably, the chances are, if you present people with a plan that they've never seen before, they're going to be they'll probably get their back up and be upset about it.
Sure, they'll find something wrong with it, right?
Because you just look at that and think, well, I haven't had a say in how that's been created.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just a different way of looking at it, that it's actually, it's so important. It's so important. And I think as we're going forward, especially when you're thinking about climate crisis, like UK, most depleted country for nature on the earth, like, or one of the most, you know, there's such big challenges that need like everybody. So you just kind of think we need everybody to, or we really need to start to try and engage people. It isn't just something that, you know, the local council can just hatch up behind closed doors and the problem solved. It has to come through all, and that empowerment comes through how, like, you know, agencies engage with people, and how do we speak to people and have conversations? Because I do think people, you know, will very quickly know whether their voice is genuinely going to be listened to or not, or are they really going to be heard or not. But I think the community-led models, you know, they'll not work everywhere, but I think, and there's a lot of probably capacity building involved for certain places where if you haven't got that set up in your community already, you probably could do, but you might need a bit of capacity building to help to bring that together. But it is probably, it's such a powerful way to be able to meet local needs without people parachuting in and parachuting out. And I mean, not all the time, but I think mostly they've probably got the chances of a longer term success because it's rooted within the local area rather than people coming in. So yeah, it's definitely something that's an evolving thing. You can't fit it in a box, and it's messy.
Which is great. I mean, human relationships, human communication's messy. We should just... And
humans are messy, aren't they?
Right.
So
Let's just
you can't expect
recognize
how we
what truth is.
To be nice linear lines, because it's just not.
It's not the way anything works. That's not how nature works. And as we discussed, we're part of nature. So, so let's just acknowledge
like, even
that.
Though we like things to be really tidy, like we're messy too.
Sure. So that,
and I think that's we definitely say, like, you know, like as in the team, we're happy to just, like, you've got to be good at working in the mess and just like working through it quite organically sometimes. Sometimes, you know, you follow much more linear things, and things are a lot more black and white if there's something, you know, statutory or anything like that. But how you create things, it's quite nice that it's organic. And like sometimes people are like, come onto the reserve and they'll look out on it and they'll be like, well, what's this going to look like in 15 years? Or how are you going to manage that corner, and what are you going to do there, and what's going to be here? And actually, like, at this point, we don't really know. Like, you know,
some ideas,
we know how we know the principles for restoration, and we've got those set out. But I think what we're trying to do is not be as prescriptive, and just try and, I suppose, like, take a bit of not a backseat, because we do need to manage the land, and we're very aware we need to give it a helping hand. It's had centuries of modification, so there is and you know, the role of grazing animals, that kind of thing, dynamism. But I think it was something you said earlier about, there was a perception when we bought the land, when we said we were going to restore it for nature and like ecological restoration, that it was just going to be left and that would be it. And it's like, no, we actually have to do, like, we have to
manage it
to be able to, and the management will look different to the past, but it's that thing, it still needs to be managed, and hopefully we can do that in a way that really boost biodiversity, and we'll see species coming back that we haven't seen here for a long time.
Yeah.
So hopefully we will.
Well, I am
Yeah.
excited to watch you do your work from afar, and would love to get over
Oh,
there and
yes,
see it
please
in
do
person
visit.
sometime. I would absolutely love that.
Can give you the grand tour.
Oh, I will take you up on that. That's when I reach out, I'm expecting the grand tour. Well, I could keep talking with you, and because I love this stuff and I love the work that you're doing, but I also want to be respectful of your time. I know we're getting pretty close to an hour in this chat, but I want to give you an opportunity to do your call for action. What, after folks have listened to this or watched it and they're feeling inspired by all the amazing work that you're doing, what do you want them to do? How can they support you and help you make donations to help continue your great work? Or what do you want people to do in their own neighborhood? Or what's your call to action for folks?
Well, I can go for the sort of the Tarras Valley one first. So a Langham initiative. Obviously, we are a charity, and we are trying to generate sustainable sources of income, but we appreciate any donations. If anybody does want to donate to help us restore nature here in Langham. So if you visit our website, tarrasvalleynaturereserve.org, that's got a donations page. So any donations are always incredibly appreciated, and will go to do incredible things for people, nature, planet. And then I suppose I don't know, on a wider thing, I hope that hearing what we're doing here in Langham does inspire people to think, can they, what kind of thing can they do on their doorstep as well? It was to do what we've done in Langham started as an idea with like a handful of very everyday people that decided to do something, and look where we are. So I think it's just never underestimating like the power of what can happen when you come together and you get a few like-minded people that can come together, and the change that can be achieved. And I think we definitely need hope right now, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
And I think we felt a lot of the time, there's still moments now and I'm like, oh, this feels impossible. And then you get there, and it's all about like your mindset, but also the people that are involved. So I think definitely just having hope and that nothing's impossible is always the message to take away. Keep chipping away.
Well, I will put on the show notes page links to the website and links to the donation page, and encourage anybody listening to this or watching it that they go contribute and support the amazing work that you're doing there. And you talking about hope is also another great transition, almost like we planned this, but we didn't. I end every episode of Stories Sustain Us by asking my guests about hope, because it is something that you said that I agree with. It's something that we need. And we talk about hard subjects sometimes on these shows, the climate catastrophes and the challenges ahead to move forward together. These are difficult things to talk about sometimes. So hope is a powerful tool in how do we move forward, and really looking at hope in the sense of you have a vision for a better future. You have some sort of loose or maybe specific plan of action to go by, and then you have a sense of agency that you can do something to help get there. Might be hard, you might not make it, but you have a vision, you have some action you can take, and you feel you can do something about it. So I want to ask you 3 questions, Jenny, and then kind of just give me your first heartfelt response to these questions. So the first question for you about hope is, what is your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally or professionally or for the world. Just what do you hope for? What's your vision for a better future?
It's funny, I have to do a quote for something I hope for in 100 years time, actually. So I've actually been thinking about this a lot because I'm being filmed tomorrow. And mine was that, like, say in 100 years time, people look back on us now and say they were the ones that changed everything for the better. And I think that's mine. I want to be part of, and I think, everybody who's doing work like this and trying to make a change, that's what you're doing it for, really. You're doing it so that you are leaving a legacy behind that's better than, better for somebody, all the future generations. And I think wouldn't that be amazing for people to look back on us now and say, oh, they were the ones that really changed everything and changed the course of humanity for the better. So yeah, that's my answer for that one.
Nice. So the second question, I think you may have answered it a little bit, but I want to make sure I give you some space to answer in further detail if you want to. So why is that your vision for a better future?
I think because it takes us beyond ourselves, and it takes us to looking at what legacy are we going to leave behind, and that it's bigger than us. And I think when you come away from looking at it as an individual and you start to look at things as a collective, it does make us more sort of community minded. It makes us think about the future. It makes us think about sustainability, and you come be like you sort of come out of a sort of more of an inward looking perspective. And I think that is somewhere where we all need to go, really, if we are going to meet the challenges that we're facing.
Wonderful. So the final question, imagine that future exists now. And we might not be around 100 years from now, but imagine what you just envisioned is actually happening. How does that make you feel?
Really, really hopeful. And yeah, I suppose if I think about it, I think it just makes me hopeful and also empowered to keep going.
Yeah.
And just keep going, to think about like, what could that look like in 100 years? It's way beyond us. But actually, what do we all want to be leaving behind? What kind of planet do we want to leave behind? And I think that's the thing to keep going with, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that, something beyond yourself.
Wonderful. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for your time and joining me on the show. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you, and I do hope to stay in touch and continue to watch the amazing things that you're doing, and absolutely love to take you up on that tour someday.
Yes, do.
Fingers crossed.
Please do come and visit.
So
it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll leave you with the last word. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we head out today?
I think I'm all talked out. It's been great.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jenny. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of another inspiring episode of Stories Sustain Us. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Jenny Barlow for sharing her incredible journey with us today. From her roots in Sunderland to her transformative work at Tarras Valley Nature Reserve, Jenny's story is a testament to the power of community, resilience, and hope. Her insights into integrating people and nature in land management and the impact of grassroots initiatives reminds us that change often begins with small, determined actions. The historic community land buyout in Langham is a shining example of what's possible when people come together with a shared vision. Jenny's passion for fostering stewardship, her commitment to the Langham Initiative's 4 pillars of sustainability, and her unwavering belief in the power of collective action have left me, and I hope all of you, inspired. When I first heard about this Langham initiative, I was really blown away by it. And the more I looked into it and prepared for this interview with Jenny, the more amazed I am at it. Just this whole community coming together to buy out this over now 10,000 acres of land and put it into community ownership to restore it and regenerate not only the land, but turn their economy around, from what used to be an industrial type of economy that is, 19th, 20th century economy, moving forward and looking at how restoring our environment can also restore our economies. It's really a powerful story, and I encourage you to go check it out. The website's here, and I'll put it on the show notes for you to see as well. And if you can, support them as Jenny asked for. It's do what you can to help this initiative keep going and growing and really leading not only Scotland but I think the world in some really amazing ways of showing how community can come together and engage in such a powerful, restorative and regenerative way. So with that, I want to thank Jenny once again for showing us that even in the face of challenges, hope and collaboration can lead to meaningful and lasting change. And to you, the audience, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family and leave me a review and subscribe to Stories Sustain Us wherever you get your podcasts. All that stuff that I ask you to do every week, it's really important, so I appreciate all your support. And together, let's continue to amplify stories that inspire action and build a more sustainable future for all. Now, next week on Stories Sustain Us, I'll be speaking with an Oregon State University professor who specializes in biochemical oceanography and is the chief scientist at PacWave. So join us on January 28th to be inspired by his innovative work on coastal ocean carbon cycles and capturing sustainable energy from waves. You won't want to miss this engaging conversation. Episode 27 will be available at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Again, that's on January 28th. So, till next time, I'm Stephen Schauer. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.